In 1931, an article was published in the Nevada Review Minor. It was reported that another 2 skeletons were found in the Humboldt Dry Lake bed, near Lovelock, Nevada. One was said to have been measured at 8.5 feet tall and wrapped similar to Egyptian mummies, and the other measured nearly 10 feet tall. Other evidence for the giant's existence includes a handprint imprinted on the boulder in the cave, twice the size of a human hand. Many of the artifacts found in the caves can be viewed in many museums, but unfortunately, the whereabouts of the red-haired giants remains a mystery. Now, think back to when you was a child. What was the first story you heard involving giants? I'm guessing it was Jack and the Beanstalk. The story of Jack trading his cow for magic beans, which results in a beanstalk reaching the clouds where a giant lives. Did you know that this classic children's tale was actually a transformation of a more brutal story or stories from an earlier period? Yes, Jack and the Beanstalk is actually a toned down version of the many chronicles of Jack the Giant Killer. These violent tales tell of Jack on his many adventures travelling around Britain, slaying giants wherever he found them. Now it is worth mentioning that there are many ancient stories that the first inhabitants of Britain were actually giants, although this is hard to find strong evidence. Jack the Giant Slayer's most popular tale to be told was the one of him defeating the giant Cormoran. The story goes that Jack defeated Cormoran on St. Michael's Mount in Cornwall. Jack blew his horn as loud as he could, which caught the giant's attention, and the giant rushed towards Jack. Unfortunately for the giant, Jack had set a trap. He had dug a hole and covered it with twigs. The giant fell into the pit and became stuck. Jack then grabbed his pickaxe and drove it down upon the giant, hacking him to death. And why is this story relevant? Well, it just so happens that once again, a skeleton has been reported to have been found. A very big skeleton. It was supposedly found in the same location the tale was set. Roughly 250 years ago at St. Michael's Mount, a skeleton was dug up in the dungeon of the island. It measured just over 8 foot, and many believe this is a giant that Jack slayed. It was noted in the annual register of 1761, a miner accidentally found a stone coffin. Inside the coffin was the remains of a man of gigantic size. But as the skeleton was so old, it apparently turned to dust as soon as the urn made contact, and the only thing to remain was a large tooth, 2.5 inches long. The coffin was over 11 feet 3 inches, and its depth was 3 feet 9 inches. In the 1955 news report, it was stated that St. Michael's Mount was given to the British National Trust to be preserved as a historical site and a tourist destination, where the public can go and see the so-called resting place of Cormoran the Giant. And it is said that on some nights when the moon shines bright, the giant's ghost can be heard moaning from beneath the stones of his cold grave. And next on our list, we have the San Diego Giant, which was first reported in 1895. Now this one, I'll tell you, is believed to be a hoax, but there are some strange elements to its story. It was reported in 1895 that an 8 foot 4 inch tall giant was discovered by prospectors. Some said it was the remains of an unknown race, whilst others claimed it was a very large Native American. In 1896, the giant was believed to have been bought by a deputy marshal named Fred Rawson, who placed some remains on display, charging people to see the exhibit. And there it stayed for about 12 years, when in 1908, the Smithsonian Museum became interested in the mummy. Before they offered money, they apparently took a sample of the mummy's skin, and Rawson agreed to this. The Smithsonian purchased the mummy for $500. Now remember, this was in 1908, so in today's money, you're looking at maybe over $14,000. Not long after, the mummy was declared a hoax. The Smithsonian Museum claimed the mummy was made from a gelatin, and there was nothing more than a sideshow attraction. Now this is where people start to get a bit suspect. If this was true, then how can you explain how the Smithsonian Museum missed this when the mummy was looked over years before by experts, and they failed to see any resemblance to gelatin? Also, why would the Smithsonian Museum spend so much money on the mummy without first proving, without a shadow of a doubt, the authenticity of the giant's remains? And many say that they seemed overly keen to get the giant in their possession. And just like that, as soon as the mummy was so-called exposed to be a fake, it simply vanished from public eye. There are no records that now exist of the mummy's existence, apart from a photograph that may or may not be real. Now, there are also many theories that giants built some of the world's most ancient structures, as well as theories that aliens built these structures, and many other different theories are out there too. But today we'll be focusing on the giant side, and maybe one day in a different episode we'll come back to this. First of all, let's take the ancient Egyptian pyramids and how the stone was perfectly cut. I mean, these stones were absolutely massive and weighed up to 15 tons per piece. Over the course of 20 years, it was said that 20,000 workers built the pyramids. But many people struggle with the thought that mere men could get these enormous blocks so high upon the structure. And many say it just isn't possible in those times to achieve such a feat. I don't know, maybe we don't give the human race enough credit. Isn't it possible the ancient Egyptians were more than capable of building these amazing, seemingly impossible structures? Well, actually many think not. When you examine the many hieroglyphics which have been left by the ancient Egyptians, depicting the workers of a much greater size than any other Egyptian. I mean, the workers in the hieroglyphics seem to just tower over the other Egyptians in the pictures. However, some believe that the taller figures in the paintings represent a higher class of a person, rather than them being of gigantic size, and it's not to be taken literally. But then again, many of the hieroglyphics show the incredibly tall Egyptians lifting enormous rocks and wielding building tools. I mean, so can you really rule out that it isn't impossible that there was an early race of Egyptians? Giant Egyptians. And now as we move across the world and we go to Stonehenge, now I could easily do a whole episode on the mysteries of Stonehenge, but today I'm going to concentrate on the sheer size of the rocks and how it would seem impossible for humans to have built it. And once again, giants are introduced as an explanation. Some of the rocks weigh up to 60 tons, and it is generally believed that the large stones in Salisbury in England were transported one by one from Wales. Now, many believe this is an impossibility and could only have been achieved by an advanced race. A race of giants? One theory is that the mythical character Merlin helped build Stonehenge, but he didn't do it alone. It is said that he had help from an African giant. Now, I know what you're thinking. Merlin is a work of fiction, the wizard from the fictional King Arthur series. Or were they fictional? There has been many investigations to the possibility of the existence of Camelot and Arthur. But what we do know is that Merlin may have actually existed. He may have existed as two separate men whose life stories were combined to make the Merlin character, who first appeared on page in 1136. In one of the many stories of Merlin, It is said that Merlin built Stonehenge using huge stones that were brought by a giant to create a stone circle monument in Ireland, the Ring of Killarus, and with the help of his magic, the stones were brought to Salisbury. An image from the book shows Merlin and another man, as well as a massive giant, either building Stonehenge or possibly dismantling the stones in Ireland, ready for transportation back to Salisbury. And if all that sounds a little far-fetched, I'd like to hear your opinion on the following. It has been recently suggested that Stonehenge and its construction actually predates human beings, suggesting that Stonehenge existed long before human beings ever laid eyes on it. And it is entirely possible that Stonehenge is nothing more but one of nature's natural occurrences. Although, it is hard to accept this, when Stonehenge famously aligns with the summer solstice and seems to be some kind of prehistoric calendar. So if this structure was built prior to human beings being around, let alone a so-called fictional character, is it possible that a race of giants built this amazing structure for reasons lost to time? So what do you think? Did giants once walk the earth? Or do they just belong in fairy tales and mythology? Me? Like always, I like to keep an open mind. You must admit that there does seem to be a conspiracy angle around the subject. It would seem that if giants did once exist, somebody doesn't want us to know about it. But as always, I'll let you decide. Take care. I'll see you next time.